I'm Evelyn, 70 years old, and for most of my life I believed patience was my strongest virtue. That night, sitting at my own dining table in the small apartment I pay for with my pension, I realized patience can sometimes become a curse. I had roasted a chicken the way my late husband used to like it, brushed with butter and thyme, set in the center of the table with mashed potatoes and green beans. I wanted it to be a quiet evening, just a family meal. My son Daniel sat across from me, pushing his fork aimlessly, and his wife Melissa kept her eyes fixed on her phone until she suddenly looked up with a smirk. "You're not even half the woman my mother is," she said, her voice sharp enough to slice through the warm steam rising from the food. For a moment, the room fell silent except for the hum of the refrigerator. My hand froze around the serving spoon. I felt a rush of heat climb from my chest to my temples, not because I was surprised, but because it was the final straw in a long string of insults swallowed in silence. I looked at her, then at my son, who kept his head down as though if he avoided my eyes, he could avoid the shame. I pushed my chair back slowly, the scrape of its wooden leg against the tile floor louder than I expected. My voice, though calm, carried every ounce of the fury and disappointment I felt. "If your mother is such a remarkable woman," I said, leaning forward just enough to catch her gaze, "then she can start paying your rent." Melissa's jaw dropped. Daniel's fork slipped from his hand and clattered against the plate. In that moment, the truth I had hidden for months, the secret sacrifice that had kept their roof over their heads, hung in the air like smoke no one could escape. And I knew I could never go back to silence again. The clatter of Daniel's fork still echoed in my ears as I gathered the dishes. Though no one had touched much of the food, Melissa stormed into the living room, muttering about how ungrateful I was, while Daniel lingered at the table, staring at his plate as if the gravy stains could save him from looking me in the eye. I didn't chase after her. Instead, I carried the half-carved chicken back to the kitchen, my hands steady but my chest trembling with a storm I'd been holding for months. I wanted to shout, to shake my son by the shoulders and ask why he had allowed his wife to disrespect me in my own home. But the truth is, I was just as angry with myself. I had let things slide for too long. I had nodded, smiled, and kept quiet whenever Melissa rolled her eyes at my secondhand furniture or sighed when I offered to cook. I thought if I stayed patient, they'd grow up. They didn't. They only grew bolder. That night, I didn't sleep. The old clock on the dresser ticked louder than usual, and every tick seemed to count the dollars I had handed over without a word. 6 months of rent, 6 months of utilities, 6 months of scraping together every bit of my pension and even selling the wedding ring that once tied me to a man I buried 20 years ago. I still remember holding that little velvet box in the pawn shop, my fingers trembling as I let it go, telling myself I'd get it back one day. I didn't. The next morning, Daniel knocked on my bedroom door. His voice was small, like a boy who had been caught with his hand in the cookie jar. "Mom, can we talk?" I opened the door and saw him standing there in sweatpants and an old hoodie, his eyes bloodshot. He didn't look like the confident young man I remembered dropping off at college years ago. He looked beaten down, and not just by me. "I didn't mean for it to go this far," he said, following me into the kitchen. "Melissa, she just has high standards. She wants people to respect us, to see us as successful. I thought if we just kept up appearances, I'd find a new job and we'd be fine." I poured coffee into my chipped mug and let him talk. He admitted he'd lost his last job not because of company downsizing, but because he kept showing up late. He confessed Melissa had pushed him to keep leasing expensive cars, eating out at restaurants, and posting photos to keep up with her friends. Every word made my stomach sink lower. "Do you know what I gave up? Daniel?" My voice cracked before I could stop it. I stopped refilling my arthritis medication. I walk around with pain every day because I was too busy paying for your bills. I sold your father's ring. Do you even understand what that means to me? He pressed his palms into his eyes, groaning as if the weight of my words finally hit him. I'm sorry, Mom. I didn't know. That was the problem. He didn't know because I hadn't told him. I had protected him from the truth like I always had, thinking I was shielding him from hardship. Instead, I had shielded him from responsibility. When Melissa finally came back that afternoon, still bristling with resentment, I didn't raise my voice. I simply told them both the same thing. I would no longer cover their rent. The lease had 30 days left, and after that, they'd need to figure it out on their own. Melissa laughed, sharp and bitter. You wouldn't actually kick your own son out. What would the neighbors think? I looked her straight in the eye. They'll think I finally found my backbone. Her face flushed crimson. She grabbed her purse and stormed out again. This time, Daniel didn't follow her. He sat at the kitchen table, silent, his hands shaking around his coffee cup. I felt a strange calm settle over me. For the first time in months, maybe years, I wasn't sinking under the weight of guilt or obligation. The decision was made. I had drawn the line. That night, I wrote a list of my expenses on a yellow notepad. My pension barely stretched as it was, and yet without their rent to cover, I realized I could finally afford my medication again. I could even put aside a little for something frivolous, like a trip. The thought startled me. A trip. I hadn't traveled anywhere outside Illinois in over a decade. The idea flickered like a candle in the dark, fragile, but alive. As I turned off the lamp, I didn't know what would become of Daniel or Melissa, but I knew one thing with certainty. I wasn't going back to being silent. Not ever again. The following week stretched long and uneasy. Daniel kept to himself most of the time, shuffling around the apartment like a man with nowhere left to go. Melissa came and went, slamming doors and muttering under her breath, her heels clicking like gunshots on the tile. I didn't chase after her. I had made my position clear, and repeating it would only cheapen the moment when I had finally drawn the line. But silence carries its own weight. I would catch Daniel standing at the window late at night, arms folded, eyes blank as he stared at the empty parking lot. Once, I heard him crying softly in the shower, muffled by the running water. My chest ached, but I forced myself to stay put. This was the consequence of choices made, not just his, but mine too. One morning, as I buttered toast, Daniel sat down across from me. He didn't bother with food. His face looked pale, his eyes rimmed with dark circles. "Mom," he began, his voice hoarse, "I need to tell you the truth about everything." He confessed the lies he had fed me over the last year. He hadn't been looking seriously for jobs, not at first. He'd been too embarrassed by his repeated firings, too humiliated to apply at places that didn't fit the picture Melissa wanted their friends to see. He had spent more time scrolling through social media, comparing himself to old classmates than actually submitting resumes. Melissa. He paused, struggling for words. She needs people to see us a certain way. She says if we look successful, people will treat us better. I wanted to give her that, but I kept messing up. And when I failed again, you were always there. Mom, you bailed us out. Every time. His eyes welled. I let you carry me, and I hate myself for it. I gripped my mug, the coffee long gone cold. I wanted to reach across the table, to comfort him like when he was a boy and skinned his knee. But I stayed still. He needed to feel this. He needed to understand that love wasn't the same as rescue. "Daniel," I said softly, "you're 35 years old. I can't be your safety net anymore. Every time I cover your failures, I'm not helping you. I'm keeping you small." He looked away, ashamed. That afternoon, Melissa returned with shopping bags from a boutique downtown. She tossed them on the couch and sneered when she saw me. "So what's the plan? Evelyn, you really think we'll just roll over and end up on the street? Daniel is your son. People will talk if you throw him out." I set down my knitting and met her glare. "Let them talk. I've given you both more than I can afford. If appearances mean that much to you, Melissa, then I suggest you ask your own mother for help." The color drained from her face, and for the first time, I saw a flicker of fear behind her arrogance. She grabbed her bags and stormed into the bedroom, slamming the door. Daniel followed, but came back out alone a few minutes later. His eyes were red. "She's not staying tonight," he muttered. "She said she needs space." I didn't respond. Some silences are louder than any words. Days passed. The tension in the apartment thickened, but so did something else: clarity. I realized I had been shrinking myself for years, letting guilt carve away at my dignity. I had convinced myself that sacrificing everything for my son was the same as loving him. But love without boundaries had turned into chains for both of us. One evening, as I sat by the phone table sorting through bills, it rang. The voice on the other end made me sit up straighter. "Evelyn, it's Robert." For a moment, I was 20 again, hearing the warm, steady tone of the man I had dated in college before life pulled us apart. My heart thudded like it hadn't in decades. "I saw your name in the alumni newsletter," he continued. "I live in San Diego now. I was thinking, would you like to come visit? Spend a month by the coast? It would be wonderful to catch up." I pressed the receiver to my ear, stunned. The last time I had seen Robert, we were both young and hopeful, promising to write letters that eventually stopped coming. Now here he was, reaching out across 50 years, offering me something I hadn't dared to imagine: an escape, a chance to breathe, maybe even a second chance at life. "I don't know if I can," I whispered. "Things are complicated here." He chuckled softly. "Evelyn, things will always be complicated. That's what life is. Sometimes you just have to step away and remember who you are." After I hung up, I sat in silence, staring at the phone. My hands trembled, not from fear, but from the rush of possibility. Could I really leave? Could I put myself first after so many years of being last? That night, I dreamt of the ocean. I dreamt of sunlight spilling across the water, of laughter I hadn't heard in so long. When I woke, the morning light looked different, softer somehow. At breakfast, Daniel asked, "Are you okay, Mom? You look lighter." I smiled, surprising both of us. "I think I might take a trip." He blinked, confused. "Where?" "California," I said. "An old friend invited me." His brow furrowed. "Now? With everything going on?" "Especially now," I replied. "You need to figure out your own life, Daniel. And I need to remember I still have one." For the first time in years, I felt the weight lifting from my shoulders. My choice wasn't just about leaving, it was about reclaiming myself. And deep down, I knew this decision would change everything. The flight to California felt like a dream. I hadn't been on a plane in more than 20 years, not since my husband and I took a short trip to Florida before his illness began. As the plane lifted, I pressed my forehead to the window and watched the gray Chicago skyline shrink beneath the clouds. It felt like leaving behind a heavy coat I had worn for too long, one that had grown threadbare and suffocating. Robert was waiting at the airport, taller than I remembered, his hair silver now. but his smile exactly the same. He carried my suitcase as though it weighed nothing. And when he placed his hand on the small of my back, I felt a warmth I hadn't known in decades. His home overlooked the Pacific. The first night, we sat on his deck watching the sunset bleed into the horizon. I told him about Daniel, about Melissa, about all the sacrifices I had made until I felt hollow inside. He listened without interruption, his eyes never leaving mine. When I finished, he reached across the table and covered my hand with his. "You've carried more than anyone should," he said softly. "It's time someone carried you." I didn't realize I was crying until he handed me a napkin. For once, my tears didn't come from exhaustion or anger. They came from relief. Over the next weeks, Robert showed me a life I had forgotten existed. We walked along the beach at dawn, the cool waves brushing our ankles. We strolled through farmers markets where he bought me sunflowers and fresh peaches. He even coaxed me onto a bicycle, and though I wobbled, laughing like a child, I felt years fall away with every push of the pedals. I found myself humming again while cooking, noticing the details of the world around me, the salt in the air, the warmth of sunlight on my skin. For the first time since my husband's death, I felt like a woman, not just a mother, not just a caretaker. Meanwhile, Daniel's letters began to arrive. The first was hesitant, almost clumsy, written in uneven lines. "Mom, I started therapy. The counselor said I've been avoiding responsibility because I was afraid of failing. I guess I thought if I didn't try, I couldn't disappoint anyone. But I see now I've already disappointed you, the one person who believed in me the most. I got a job at a warehouse. It's night shifts, but it's steady. I'm saving for a room of my own. I don't expect forgiveness overnight, but I want you to know I'm trying." I read those words sitting on Robert's porch, the ocean breeze fluttering the page. My heart swelled with pride and sorrow all at once. I wrote back, not to scold or to lecture, but to encourage. "Keep going. I believe in you. But remember, this time it has to be you, not me, who makes your life work." Weeks turned into a month. Daniel's updates grew stronger. He had joined a support group. He had learned to wake on time. He was studying for a certification in logistics. I began to see glimpses of the boy I once raised, the one who had built a treehouse in our backyard with nothing but determination and a hammer too big for his hands. Melissa's name faded from his letters. He admitted she had left for good, moving in with someone else who could give her the lifestyle she craved. His words were free of bitterness, only a quiet acknowledgement. Maybe losing her was what I needed to finally find myself. One evening, as Robert and I prepared dinner, he chopped vegetables while I stirred a pot of soup. My phone buzzed. It was Daniel. His voice on the line was steady, clearer than I had heard in years. "Mom," he said, "I just wanted to tell you I'm proud of you for choosing yourself, for not giving in. I used to think you were supposed to fix everything for me. But I see now that by saying no, you gave me the chance to grow up." I clutched the phone, my eyes stinging with tears. "I'm proud of you too, Daniel." After we hung up, I turned to Robert. He smiled knowingly and poured me a glass of wine. "See? Boundaries don't break love. They save it." That night, as I lay beside him listening to the rhythm of the waves, I realized something profound. The anger that had once consumed me was gone. In its place was a calm strength, born from the decision to honor myself. The climax of my life wasn't in sacrificing until nothing was left. It was in finally saying, enough. And from that single word, everything had changed. For me, for Daniel, for the future neither of us had dared to imagine before. 6 months after I first stepped foot in California, I returned to Chicago briefly, but not to stay. Daniel met me at the train station, taller somehow, straighter in his stance. He wore a pressed shirt, his hair neatly cut, and when he hugged me, I felt a quiet strength in his arms. "I moved into my own place," he told me proudly. "It's small, but it's mine. I pay the bills myself. No one else." His eyes softened. "Thank you, Mom, for letting me fall." I didn't understand it before, but I do now. I touched his cheek, feeling the faint stubble beneath my fingertips. "I never stopped believing in you, Daniel. I just needed you to believe in yourself." We spent the afternoon in his modest apartment. He brewed coffee in a scratched-up pot and showed me the textbooks he had bought for his logistics certification. There was no trace of Melissa, no hint of her perfume or her biting laugh. Instead, there was peace. For the first time, I saw my son not as the boy who leaned on me, but as a man beginning to stand tall. A week later, I boarded a plane back to California with my heart lighter than it had been in years. Robert met me at the airport once again, this time with a bouquet of yellow roses in his hand. As he placed them in my arms, he whispered, "Welcome home." We didn't rush into grand declarations, but as days turned into weeks, it became clear that what we had found together was no fleeting spark. We planned a small ceremony on the beach, just the two of us, a minister and a handful of close friends. The waves sang as we exchanged vows, and when Robert slipped the ring onto my finger, I felt the weight of all I had carried finally release into the ocean breeze. Daniel stood by my side that day, wearing a simple suit. When it was his turn to speak, he pulled a folded note from his pocket. His voice trembled, but not from weakness. This was the tremor of truth. "Mom," he said, "for so long I thought love meant never letting go. But you taught me that real love has boundaries. You showed me that strength isn't about rescuing someone every time they stumble. It's about giving them the space to rise. You didn't just save me, you gave me back my life." Tears blurred my vision as the guests clapped softly, the ocean wind carrying his words out to sea. After the ceremony, as the sun sank low and painted the horizon in gold, I stood with Robert and Daniel watching the waves. For once, there was no heaviness, no unspoken resentment, no fear of what tomorrow might bring. There was only peace and the quiet certainty that we had all survived the storm. I thought back to the night Melissa had sneered across my dinner table, to the moment I finally pushed my chair back and said, "Enough." That moment had felt like an ending, but in truth, it was a beginning. It was the night I remembered my worth, the night my son began to find his own, the night the future opened like a door I hadn't realized was waiting. Now, standing barefoot in the sand, Robert's hand in mine, my son smiling beside me, I understood the lesson in its simplest form. It's never too late. Not too late to choose yourself, not too late to set boundaries, not too late to find love, and certainly not too late to live again. And as the tide rolled in and kissed the shore, I whispered it to myself, a promise etched into the rest of my days. It's never too late to be happy. Thank you for watching. If you enjoy these family drama and revenge stories, please subscribe and join me for more every day.